Girim Yat Kripatamaham Vande Shri Gurudinataranam Paramanandam Madhavam. Hare Krishna, thank you again once for joining. So last week we finished 3 sections. Up till last week we finished 3 sections in 2 classes. We had done the preface, we had done the introduction, and the first chapter of the Nectar of Devotion. Today the plan is to complete chapters 2 and 3. I'll pause for a few minutes and see if there are any questions or discussion items based on our previous class. I also wanted to welcome Ram Tulsi Mataji back from the Holy Dham, and wanted to thank her on behalf of everybody to give us the opportunity to get a glimpse of the wonderful yatra that you had. Thank you, Mataji.
Thank you, Prabhu. It was an incredible trip, and I'm missing the Dham already.
Did you get this Tulsi bead from there, or do you have had this for a while? The one around your neck? It's
from Vrindavan, but I had it for a while.
It looks like one of those Radha Kund Tulsi beads. They specialize in the large beads.
Right. Yeah. But I've had this for a while. But yeah, this was an incredible spiritual trip. I really felt welcomed by Mother India, and especially Srimati Radharani in Vrindavan. She's so merciful and loving. I really felt very connected to her over there.
I could get a sense of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Okay. Any questions? If not, we can proceed. I can ask the questions. Okay. So based on what we have read so far, would anybody, and please raise your hand if you want to answer the question. The Nectar of Devotion is a commentary on a book. What's the name of the book and the author of the book? Okay, Rangamataji.
Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu by Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur.
Okay, you have it half right. Let's see, Rajna Prabhu.
Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, right?
Right, and the author?
Goswami.
Shobhamai Mataji.
Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu by Srila Rupa Goswami.
Thank you. Very good. So the Nectar of Devotion is a commentary. It's not a verse by verse translation as Prabhupada typically did. He summarized the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu in Nectar of Devotion and added a little bit of his own commentary. But essentially, it's a summation. So one of the early things that is done in the NOD is that it's the definition of bhakti is given, and can anybody let me know what are the mandatory attributes of bhakti? So if you remember, Rupa Goswami gives the Swarup Lakshan and the Tathastha Lakshan. The Swarup Lakshan are that which is mandatory, and if they are not there, then essentially it cannot be considered as bhakti. Tathastha Lakshan are secondary. So can somebody give me one? There are more than one, but if you can give me one, and then we can go around and see who else. Chaitanya Prabhu.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. Anya Bilashita Shunya.
Okay, so that is not the Swarup Lakshan. That's not the mandatory one. Let's see if somebody else wants to. Praveen Prabhu,
अहैतुकी अप्रतिहता
say that again.
अहैतुकी अप्रतिहता
Okay, I think you're confusing two different verses. That verse comes in the Bhagavatam. Savai Pumsha Paro Dharmo Yato Bhakti Radhoksajay Ahituki Pratiyata. The verse that appears for the nectar of devotion is what Chaitanya Ras Prabhu said, which is Anivilashita Shunyam Jnana Karma Dhyanavitam. Sometimes Google doesn't give you the right answer. So, but good points for attempting. Just in terms of the attributes, the Swarup Lakshan is Anukulena Krishnano Shilana Bhakti Uttamam. That it should be directed towards Krishna, it should be favorable, and it should be an active engagement. Right? These are the three. And the secondary attributes were Anivilashita Shunyam Jnana Karma Dhyanavitam. That the bhakti should be devoid of any material desires, devoid for desire for Jnana Karmadi. So Karma Karn, Jnana, Adi means Astanga, etc. If the Sarup Lakshans are present, then it is bhakti. If the Tathas Lakshan are present, then it is Shuddha Bhakti. So if somebody is executing devotional service, but with some material desires, it's still bhakti, but it is known as Mishrit Bhakti. Right? But if somebody is executing without any material desires, then it is pure devotional service. Okay. So the earlier chapters of Nectar of Devotion are technical, and I would strongly recommend the devotees to study them and revise them. Otherwise, the later chapters, they're based on the earlier chapters. You'll have trouble following them. Also, they're foundational to the whole Bhakti Tattva. That is the foundation of our Gaudiya Vaishnava movement. Mahaprabhu specifically asked for this to be written to disambiguate the notion that bhakti is just an emotional outburst. It is meant for the sentimentalists, that all the devotees do is sing and dance. But underneath everything that is done, there is a very strong philosophical basis. And Nectar of Devotion brings this forth. So studying it properly builds our own conviction, and it also helps in discussing with others. When somebody says, oh, we are Karam yogis, you guys, all you guys are doing is singing and dancing. And then on the strength of what we understand from NOD, we can present the philosophical basis. So today we will do chapters 2 and 3. So I'm going to share the slide. I understand there was some problem in sharing this deck because of its size. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to convert it into a PDF.
Prabhu, I actually converted into 2 halves and shared it in the group, Prabhu.
I see. Do you think it's better to convert it into a PDF? Then I noticed that the size becomes actually almost 10% of the original size.
Yeah, but original one also was PDF, but because the PDF had about, I think, 92 pages, that's why it was almost like 12 MB, which could not be shared. So I divided it into 2 halves and shared it in the group.
Okay. Thank you for that, Prabhu.
You can send it to me, Prabhu. If it is too much, then I can do the same thing again, like divide them into 2 parts and then.
Okay. Maybe I'll send it to you anyway, Prabhu. If you can just do that.
Yeah, sure, Prabhu.
I'll send it to you in any case. I'll send the PowerPoints, and then you can figure out whether you can send it as a PowerPoint or a PDF or
Sure,
whatever.
Prabhu.
Okay, good.
Hare Krishna.
So this is just background. So today we'll start chapter 2. Chapter 2 talks about the first stages of devotion. So, so just to give a little bit of an overarching view, when one begins to execute bhakti, then the initial stages of bhakti are known as sadhana bhakti. And as one advances, then one advances to bhava bhakti and prema. The discussion in this chapter is essentially talking about what are the initial stages of bhakti. So in all the stages of bhakti, the focus is, of course, Krishna. But in the early stage of bhakti, the stage where we are, sadhana bhakti, the essential principle that is made is that one should act in such a way that one always remembers Krishna and never forgets him. Now, why is this not an injunction in the later stages of bhakti? The reason being that at those stages it is natural. So there is no need to give that injunction. But in the early stage of bhakti, where the tendency is more to focus on the material aspects, then the process of bhakti is designed in such a way that the mind goes to more and more to Krishna. Right? And we'll speak more about this. So chapters 2 to 5, they give us the prerequisite for taking up bhakti. So sadhana bhakti, which is the first stage of bhakti, it is a practice to awaken the dormant love for Krishna. Right? So notice the word that it does not instill love for Krishna. Why? Because it's already there. Jivere Sarupoy Krishna Nityadas. Right? That tendency is already there, but it is covered. So in sadhana bhakti, that dormant love is awakened. And that love will later on mature into bhava and prema. So what is the inspiration for sadhana bhakti? This is one of the questions that may be asked, that if the person does not have love for Krishna, or if the love is dormant, then why would one execute bhakti to begin with? And this is the situation wherein most of us are. So what was the inspiration? The inspiration was that we had faith in the scriptures. We had faith in Guru or Gurus. So Guru, one who gives Diksha, or Gurus who give Shiksha, or Path Pradakshak Guru. So because of the combination of these two, one gets attracted to the desire to awaken the dormant love for Krishna. Right? That love is still not manifested. So there are very few of us who are lucky enough that we get up in the morning and we are fully enthusiastic. Time to do my rounds. There are very few of us who will finish our 16 rounds and say, oh, just 16 rounds. Let me do another 16 rounds, right? Most of us are like, we do the 16 rounds and then we close our japa bag, put it aside, and then we heave a sigh of relief. Okay, rounds are done. What next to do? So the inspiration is not that we have spontaneous love for Krishna, but what we have is a genuine desire to awaken that spontaneous love. And that inspiration about what is the process to awaken that love, that is coming from Guru, Sadhu and Shastra. Right? So it is known as Vaidhi Bhakti. Vaidhi Bhakti means Vidhi. Vidhi means according to rules and regulation, do's and don'ts. So when we take initiation, we get 1 do and 4 don'ts. The 4 don'ts are the 4 regulative principles. The 1 do is chant 16 rounds, right? So that's the framework in which our Vaidhi Bhakti is started. And then later on it becomes a Raga Bhakti, which is natural attraction. And Raga Bhakti, as we will see, is still in the category of Sadhana Bhakti. That while we have a natural attraction, it's not fully spontaneous. So we'll also see that the eligibility of Sadhana Bhakti is attraction for Krishna. So while we don't have that spontaneous love for Krishna, but we have a desire to experience that. We experience that in glimpses, right? So this is what our eligibility is. Because if we didn't have that desire, then the scriptures are available for everybody. Guru and Sadhu are available for so many people. But yet a very few people take to Bhakti. Why is that? Because there is that taste that, yes, I want to experience attraction to Krishna. And as I mentioned, the basic principle of Sadhana Bhakti is to always remember Krishna and never forget him. Right? And the principles that we follow is hearing and chanting. And we will also talk in the later chapters about how bhakti can be executed from any varna or ashram. There is no restriction there. So this is a bit of a glimpse into what is coming up. So just as I mentioned, there are 3 stages of bhakti: sadhana, which is by practice. So by sadhana is by practice, and then we have Vaidhi and Raga. So regulated is Vaidhi and spontaneous is Raga. Bhav and Prem are essentially the same. The only difference is intensity. When Bhav becomes very intense, it becomes Prem. But substantively, there is no difference between the 2. So now we are going to talk about the development of the 6 characteristics of pure devotional service, right? So we talked about the 6 characteristics of bhakti, and at different stages of the bhakti, these 6 characteristics appear. So just to give you a brief refresh, the 6 stages, the 6 characteristics of bhakti are Kleshangani, which is relief from material distress; Shubhada, which is attainment of auspiciousness; then Moksha Lagutakrat, which means that the devotee derives the happiness of liberation; Sudurlabha, very rarely achieved; then Sandranam Visheshatma, that it automatically puts one in transcendental pleasure; and Shri Krishna Akarshani, it's the only means to attract Krishna. Right, so these are the 6 qualities of bhakti or the 6 manifest symptoms of bhakti as it develops. Now what we will do is that we will frame these 6 qualities of bhakti against the 3 stages of bhakti. Okay. So at the stage of sadhana, the first 2 symptoms appear. So the symptoms of kleshangani and shubhada. So even, and this talks about the potency of bhakti, that even when bhakti is being performed externally, even when one is performing bhakti according to rules and regulation, then because the influence of bhakti, already the devotee is experiencing relief from all kinds of distress. In all other practices, this relief from distress is available at much later stages, almost at the stage of maturity. In karma, kand, gyan, it's very, very in the stage of almost the final stages of maturity does one feel real kleshangani and shubhada. In bhakti, it is available at the early stage, right? So in the Vaidhi bhakti, when one is at the stage of anartha nivriti, then these become very prominent. But one begins to experience right at the beginning, right? And we had this discussion about what does kleshangani mean? That maybe the kleshas are there, but the agni is not there for the devotees. That maybe there are material distresses, but they don't allow it to bewilder them. And because devotees lead a simple life that is geared towards introspection, auspiciousness automatically comes. Okay, then the next stage was bhava, and in bhava, 2 additional symptoms appear. So the first 2 stages are there. So we already have kleshangani and shubhada, the first 2. Third and fourth appear, which is moksha lagutakrat and sudurva. So moksha lagutakrat, as I mentioned, is happiness deriving liberation. So those who are jnanis or asthang yogis, their ultimate happiness is moksha. Brahmavadis, they want moksha. But in bhakti, the happiness at this stage is so intense that the happiness that one gets from moksha, it becomes insignificant. So the devotees, they don't even care about liberation, because ultimately the jiva is anandamaya. The jiva is looking for happiness, and they are experiencing a lot more happiness in the execution of bhakti. So somebody comes and says moksha, they say, no, I have something better. Then also at this stage appears the sudurlabha. Sudurlabha means that it is difficult to attain. And the reason it is difficult to attain is because at this stage, one begins to control Krishna. So Krishna is a little reluctant to give his control. He will happily give mukti and bhukti, but not bhakti at bhava level. Now we move on to the stage of prema. At the stage of prema, the last 2 symptoms appear, which is sandranam visheshatma. So the happiness that was manifesting earlier on, the moksha lagutakrat, that becomes even more intense. Sandrananda visheshatma. Sandrananda means that it is highly concentrated. It is very, even so different acharyas have tried to give a glimpse of it by comparison, that a drop of bhakti in the stage of prema, it exceeds an ocean of bhakti that one can appear, the ocean of happiness that one can hope to achieve through liberation. which is, even they say that it is just qualitative. And Krishna Akarshani, that at this stage, one begins to attract the attention of Krishna. So attracting attention of Krishna means that there is reciprocation. We always have Krishna's attention. Everybody has Krishna's attention, even the non-devotees. As Paramatma, Krishna is there. For them is neutral. For devotees, he becomes more and more partial towards them. But at this stage, Krishna is now at the stage of prema. The Krishna is hankering for the association of the devotees. We see in the Vraj pastimes, right, where Krishna is hankering for the association of gopis and Srimati Radharani and the Gopa friends, because he gets attracted by the bhakti in their heart. Okay, so this is a summary of the 6 attributes of bhakti and where they're appearing: sadhana, bhakti, bhav, and prema, and the squares that talk about at which stage they are appearing. Chapters 2 through 16 describe sadhana bhakti, right? So up till chapter 1, it was setting the stage. Now from 2 to 16, which is of the 19 chapters, it's the longest section. And essentially because it is meant for practicing devotee, meant for sadhakas. So 2 to 16 is talking about sadhana bhakti. And sadhana bhakti is divided into 2 parts. The first is Vaidhi, wherein the bhakti is executed as per vidhi, as per rules and regulation. So this is chapters 3 to 14. And 15 and 16 talk about Raghunag Bhakti. Raghunag Bhakti is still sadhana because it is executed by following the instructions. The difference is that the instructions in this case are more are different kinds of instruction. Like at the stage of sadhana bhakti, the instruction is you chant your round. At the stage of Raghunag Bhakti, the instruction is to follow the pastimes of advanced devotees, to do manasa seva. So they are more advanced instructions, and they're executed by one who has already achieved a fair level of spontaneous attraction to Krishna. If it was given at an earlier stage, it would just result in Sahijyavadi. So the Sahijyas, they without perfecting the Vaidhi Bhakti, they jump to Raga Bhakti or sometimes to Bhava and Prem. And it's essentially, it's just mental speculation or cheating or in some cases it is even sinful activities. But for devotees who have been following the process properly, the result of following sadhana Vaidhi Bhakti is that one develops spontaneous rag, spontaneous attraction. One begins to enjoy Krishna consciousness, right? So because of that, they spontaneously are attracted to it. And then there are processes that are given that one needs to follow. Okay. So now we come to one of the key philosophical aspects of sadhana bhakti, which is the qualification or eligibility for practicing devotional service. Now, this is a little confusing because earlier on, Srila Rupa Goswami said that if one simply has attraction to executing bhakti, then he is qualified to practice bhakti. right? So that was the eligibility earlier on given for practicing bhakti. Now, where does that attraction for practicing bhakti come from? Right, so it comes from actually practicing bhakti. So it becomes a little bit of a circular situation, that the eligibility is also the result of practicing it. So at some point or other, there needs to be something that breaks this circularity, right? So since all of us are practicing devotees, we all have this experience in our lives that something happened that caused us to become inclined towards bhakti. So Rupa Goswami says that ultimately there are two things that happen. One is purvaras, that in the 6th chapter, Krishna says, and this is for yogis, but it's also applicable to devotees, that when one does not complete the process, one gets another opportunity. So devotees are born because they were practicing devotion in the previous life. So they have already developed a taste for it. And when the situation presents itself, then they take to it spontaneously. I was reading about Indra Prabhu. So Indra Prabhu is also from the DC area. Actually joined in the temple in DuPont Circle. And it's mentioned that he had very little American, so like any typical American back in the 70s, very little prior understanding of Krishna. He had some understanding of yoga in India, but he was going down the street and the devotees, he also lived in DC, the devotees were doing Harinam, and he just heard that sound. He heard the sound of the kirtan, and he just left everything and ran after that sound. It said that his shoe fell off. He didn't even care about that. So 1 foot shoe, 1 foot no shoe, he ran after that sound, which was basically devotees doing Harinam. So where does that spontaneous attraction come? Purvaras, that it continuing from previous lifetime. And there is always a catalyst that manifested. That catalyst is typically the mercy of the devotee. That some devotee at some point has met us, given us a book, invited us for prasadam, sat us down, did some Krishna Katha, invited themselves to our house. So one way or the other, we got mercy of so those devotees are known as path prataksha, that they're basically revealing the path once again, right? So this is what gives one the eligibility, that bhakti performed in previous lifetimes and the mercy of a devotee. Of the two, the mercy of the devotee is stronger. So even if somebody has not performed bhakti in previous lifetimes, but gets the mercy of a pure devotee, then the person becomes eligible for performing bhakti. Now, what is the qualification for getting the mercy of a devotee? Ahituki. It is causeless. There is no qualification. Sometimes it's said agyat sukriti, that when a person does devotional service unknowingly, right? Somebody, you give somebody a Bhagavad Gita, and the person takes it in the hand and then says, "No, I'm sorry, I don't want it," and then moves away. But Srila Prabhupada would say that is agyat sukriti. The person's devotional life has begun. He talked to a devotee, he held the Gita in his hand. People sometimes say the word Krishna, agyat sukriti, right? So, but the most powerful force here is the mercy of the devotee. And the mercy of the devotee is completely dependent on the devotee. It's like a butterfly that flies and sits on various flowers and gives nectar over there. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about sadhana bhakti, because this is what we are going to be talking about for the until 14th chapter, sadhana vedi bhakti. 16th chapter, 15, 16 is sadhana raga bhakti. So let's first define sadhana bhakti. So sadhana does not create love of Godhead, it revives love of Godhead, right? Because God, love of Krishna is intrinsic in every jiva. And the process of sadhana bhakti is basically like if there is a seed. So in our kitchens, we may have like beans, and they're inside a box, and they're in the closet, in the cupboard. So they're just passive, they're inert. But you take one bean out, you put it in the soil, give it some sunshine, give it some water, and the bean will sprout. So the bean has all the ability to become a plant, but it was dormant. So the process of sadhana bhakti is essentially reviving that ability. And Prabhupada gives two analogies to explain. One is walking. So it's not that we teach the child to walk. The child already knows how to walk, right? We simply remind the child how to walk, right? Because if we could teach the child to do anything, then we could teach it to fly. But it's not the intrinsic ability of the human being to fly. But walking, that's the intrinsic ability. So what the mother does is, she'll hold the hand, she'll walk with the child, and she'll encourage the child, and then the child starts to walk. Similarly, health, a person has maybe under some temporary health issues, and then the doctor helps the patient recover the health. It's the patient recovering the health, not the doctor. But the doctor creates an environment that is suitable to it. And so Prabhupada gives this on pages 20 and 21 of the NOD. So Srila Prabhupada explains that the term practice is insufficient to fully describe the process of bhakti. Because generally, practice, it means that you're acquiring some skill. Like you're practicing a new instrument, or you're practicing a new game. So you have to acquire some skill. But Prabhupada, he says that this practice is not for developing something artificial. So because the language is what it is, we say that this is bhakti in practice, but more accurate would be that this is the revival of bhakti. Yeah. So Prabhupada says that Krishna consciousness cannot be aroused simply by practice. Actually, there is no such practice. When we wish to develop our innate capacity for devotional service, there are certain processes by which we are able to do so. Such practice is called sadhana bhakti. Now, what is the most important part of of sadhana. Right? So this is a point that gets repeated a few times because it's essential to sadhana bhakti, which is to somehow or the else fix one's mind on Krishna. So this picture here is essentially a conversation between Narad Muni and Yudhishthira Maharaj. So when this comes in the 7th canto of the Bhagavatam, that when Yudhishthira Maharaj sees that when Krishna has killed Shishupal, then the soul of Shishupal enters into Krishna's lotus feet. And Yudhishthira Maharaj is very amazed. He says that the Shishupal, even before he could talk, he was cursing Krishna. He was so envious of Krishna. And then how is it possible that he achieved the destination that even advanced yogis are not able to do it? So then Narad Muni basically says that Tasmat kena api upayena mana Krishna niveshiyat. That somehow or the else, if one is able to fix their mind on Krishna, and then he says, even if it is by enmity, and he gives the example of Shishupal and Kamsha. Even if it is by lusty desires, like Kubja, or by any other means, right? Kamsa by fear, Shishupal by envy, the Yadus because they had a family relationship, the Pandavas because they had affection for Krishna, and then he says for the general devotees by our sadhana bhakti, we are able to bring our mind to Krishna. That is the essence of sadhana bhakti. And then Prabhupada makes this bold statement that it is the duty of the spiritual master to find ways and means for his disciple to fix his mind on Krishna. That is the beginning of sadhana bhakti. So with this perspective, now we can understand how so many things are being done around us. How Prabhupada created the program at the temple, where beginning from 4:30 all the way till 9 p.m., there is one way or the other to attract the mind to Krishna. Whether it is through arti, whether it is through offering, whether it is through kirtan, whether it is through class, there is one way or the other that is to attract the mind to Krishna. When we see the senior devotees, the sannyasis, they're constantly endeavoring to create this environment. They travel everywhere, they go to houses, do Krishna Katha, make presentations on Zoom. What is the purpose? One way or the other, bring the mind to Krishna. That is the beginning of sadhana bhakti. So then Prabhupada says that Mahaprabhu has given us the authorized process. What is it? Chanting. So by chanting, we are speaking, hearing, and remembering. Shravana, Kirtan, Smaran. All three are going on at the same time. So it's a authorized and a potent process to bring our mind to Krishna. And it is also the Yuga Dharma. So we talked about two kinds of sadhana bhakti. Vaidhi bhakti is where the inspiration comes from the scriptures, right? Which is the do's and the don'ts. And when the inspiration comes from a natural attraction, then it is Raguna sadhana bhakti. Okay. Again, emphasis on the principle of sadhana bhakti. Always remember Krishna and never forget Krishna. The important thing to note here is that sarvavidi nishedhyato etayor evar kinkara. That all other rules and regulations, they are subservient to this. Kinkara actually means slave. So when one is following sadhana vaidhi bhakti, then there are so many regulations that one has to do, and we will see later on. There are so many do's and don'ts that are there. but they all need to be architected in such a way that they nourish these two principles, that always remember Krishna and never forget Krishna. So there is a slight difference. One may say that what's the difference between always remembering Krishna and never forgetting Krishna? Remembering Krishna means doing the things that you are supposed to do, right? So when we chant our rounds, that is a way to remember Krishna. Never forgetting Krishna means not doing the things that we are not supposed to do. So we have the 4 regulative principles. So it's like, let's say, meat eating. So the principle is no meat eating. So that principle is in the do not forget Krishna, because if a person engages in meat eating, then the ability to remember Krishna becomes impeded. So this is why these two things go hand in hand. Do the do's. And what will that give you? Constant remembrance of Krishna. Do not do the don'ts. And what will that give you? That will make sure that you never forget Krishna. And everything else, waking up early in the morning, sleeping early, and following certain etiquette in entering the temple, greeting other devotees, doing prayer, all of them, they are architected in a way that they nourish these two principles. Okay, and if this is followed, everything else will fall into line all by itself. So this is applicable to everyone, all varnas and all ashrams, right? So it's not that it is only applicable for Brahmins and not for Vaishyas and not for Shudras. Rupa Goswami is making this point that this principle is universal. Okay, so Rupa Goswami actually speaks quite extensively about it. Prabhupada summarizes it, but it's an important principle because in the Vedas, at least in Karma Kand, etc., there are a lot of exclusions. That only Brahmins can do this, Vaishyas cannot do this, or Malichas cannot do this, etc. So Rupa Goswami, he speaks quite eloquently about this, saying that there is no consideration of birth, gender, of even form. Example is given of Mahaprabhu inducing the animals in the Jharkhand forest. So there is absolutely no restriction. And this principle of practicing sadhana bhakti by always remembering Krishna and never forgetting Krishna is universal. Okay, and Prabhupada describes, so Prabhupada gives, Prabhupada sometimes he writes the books as if everything is for a newcomer. So he describes what are varnas, the 4 varnas, the 4 ashrams, and for the students over here, they're already familiar about it. Okay, so quickly, Brahmana is born out of the head of the Lord. The Kshatriya is to protect the person. The Vaishyas are for farming and cow protection. Shudras is to protect the others. Okay, now Srila Prabhupada follows Rupa Goswami's lead and gives Shastric references to the points that he has made. Right. So I had initially said that Rupa Goswami, he's very exacting, that he never says anything unless he's able to substantiate it with a reference to a bona fide scripture. whether it is, a lot of it is from Bhagavatam, but he also quotes from other Vedas and Puranas. So these are all quotes that are there. I'm not going to go through them, but these are quotes that are given, and there are more quotes that are there. So ultimately, Prabhupada's mission is that regardless of whether you're whatever you are, whichever varna, whichever ashram, even if you're not within a varna and ashram, let everyone be engaged in Krishna consciousness. Prabhupada said that will adjust the whole situation and everyone will be happy and peaceful in this world. Okay. So that's the end of the second chapter, and I'll pause over here and see if you have questions. So I don't believe we'll be able to do the third chapter, so I'll stop here. Stop the share also. Okay. And yes, we have Rajkumar Prabhu. Please go ahead.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji. So we talk about this sadhana bhakti and prema, ragana bhakti. What about bhakti out of fear, like bhaya? Like sometimes you do bhakti because thinking that if you don't do, you may go to hell or you will be born as a animal or something wrong happens. What are the repercussions? Like how does it end in?
So if we apply the definition of bhakti, what Rupa Goswami tells is that bhakti should be favorable to Krishna and directed towards Krishna, right? So it should be done something that is in a favorable mood to Krishna. If somebody is doing it because of some other reason, that's not considered, it fails the primary definition of bhakti. So the example that is now Kamsa is a little different. He was always thinking of Krishna out of fear. When will Krishna come and kill me? When will Krishna come and kill me? Now, what he was executing is not bhakti. So it is some form of endeavor that he is doing driven by fear, but it does not, Kamsa does not count it in the category of devotees, or Shishupal is not counted as a devotee because he was always thinking of Krishna out of fear. So if somebody is fearful of Krishna and doing things, it's not really bhakti. Now they may get the mercy eventually and start doing it out of love, but it does not constitute itself as bhakti.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Gayatri Mataji?
Hare Krishna. So I wanted to understand, is mukti given only as a byproduct of bhakti, or if the person really has the goal to get mukti, to get this liberation and serves Krishna with this goal, he can get mukti?
So the answer is yes to both the parts of your question. That when one executes bhakti, then mukti and bhukti, they're automatically available. Prabhupada would give the example of you have 100 rupee note, and then you have 10 rupees and 20 rupees. It's already there in the 100 rupee. So when one is doing bhakti, then bhukti and mukti are available to the person. The devotees, they don't seek it out because, as we said, that one of the symptoms of bhakti is that they're already experiencing a higher taste. So that is why moksha labhuta aprat, that their attraction towards devotion automatically surpasses any attraction towards mukti. But if they desire mukti, it is available to them. Right? So if for whatever reason, I can't think of an example, but if for whatever reason a devotee is executing bhakti with a desire for mukti, that is available to them if they seek it out.
Mm-hmm. All right. So if someone desires mukti and does bhakti, he still can get mukti.
he can still get mukti, absolutely. That in the Bhagavatam, this point is made that whether you want material opulences, whether you want liberation, or whether you want love of Krishna, in all cases, execute bhakti. Bhakti will give you whatever results you desire.
All right.
And because there are people, there are Mishra Bhaktas who execute bhakti for the desire of material opulence. Right? And they get that. They do bhakti and they say, so it's still bhakti because it fulfills the primary characteristics of bhakti. They're doing it for Krishna. Their desire is to serve Krishna. So it is bhakti. But it is not anyabhilashita shunya. Right? They have material desire. So it's still bhakti, but it is mixed devotion. So they get the results that they want. If they want material opulence, they get material opulence. If they want liberation, they'll get liberation.
I have one more small question in regards to the example which Srila Rupa Goswami set for humanity in general, is that he divided his wealth 25% for emergency, 25% for the family, and 50% for the Krishna conscious people. So my question is this something which tells us that we need to give 50% in charity of what we make, or I'm not understanding this properly? So
it's a good question. It's a question that's discussed a lot. Prabhupada also said that practicing devotees should give 50% of their wealth, following the examples of Rupa Goswami. The short answer is that one should give whatever one can do. Whether it's 50% of your disposable wealth, whether it's 50% of your earned wealth, or whether it is 50% of your like at one point it was said that if you get $100, then half the money you should put it for your sustenance. Of the remaining, half the money you should put it for your old age or for contingencies. And then whatever is remaining, that you should use it for devotional activities, in which case it becomes 25%. So my personal understanding is that this is an injunction that however much you can give, you should give it for the service of devotees, temple, Krishna conscious activities. Okay, Shobhamai Mataji.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, you talk about the second stage of pure devotional service, Bhava, then you talk about Kleshagni, Shubhada, Mosha Lagudagrid, and Sudarlabha. Devotees already gets liberation during that period, but why pure devotees do not desire for liberation?
So the answer to that is in the explanation of Moksha Lagudagrid, that because the devotees are experiencing a much higher pleasure. So it's like if you're given two options, that you can go and visit a person who's not very friendly to you, or you can visit a devotee. You say, I'll go and visit a devotee. I can do nice Krishna Katha. All the time you'll say the same thing. Right? So the options are there to you. You can exercise the option. But you will be driven by your intrinsic desire for seeking happiness, and you will go to the second option. So similarly, when the jiva is experiencing a lot more happiness in the execution of bhakti, and then somebody comes and says, I have to offer you mukti, and then says, what will I get out of mukti? No, you get Om Shanti Shanti. So will I get an opportunity to associate with devotee? Not really. Will I get an opportunity to sing kirtan? Not really. Om Shanti Shanti. Will Krishna be there? Yeah, but in his impersonal form. What does the devotee say? I'm not really interested. All I want is Vaishnav Sam, Krishna Katha, Krishna Seva, right? So that's why they derive the conception of liberation.
Thank you.
Okay. Kokila Mataji?
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, Dandavat Pranam, Jai Srila Prabhupada. Prabhu, the first thing you were saying that So for Vaidhi Bhakti, Prabhu Vaidhi Bhakti and Raganuga Bhakti, so when we initially start, I have two questions. So when we initially start, it will be just Vaidhi Bhakti. There will not be any attachment or any love, right, Prabhu? That's what the process says when we initially start. Any person who's initially starting, there is no attachment to or devotional. So they are just following the instructions, and it's just that is why the rules and regulations.
So probably the more accurate way to frame it is not that there is no love or attraction for Krishna, but it's not the primary driving force. Right? We all have some love and attraction to Krishna. But the primary driving force at the stage of Sarnavedi Bhakti is the desire to follow the scriptures, the desire to follow the instructions of the Guru. So if you ask any initiated devotee, what drives you to chant 16 rounds every day? And what will they say? The fact that I have taken this vow with my Guru Maharaj, that drives me. Not that they look upon it as a burden or an ordeal, but the primary force is the desire to follow the scriptures, the instructions of the Guru. There is love of Krishna, but it is still at the budding stage. So it's not primary. And throughout the stage of sadhana, that love is essentially driven by rules and regulation. Srila Prabhupada would give the example of arranged marriage in India, that when a man and a woman come together in an arranged marriage, because they are strangers to each other, there is no love between them. But then they go through the framework of married life, grasta ashram, that the husband acts in a certain way, the wife acts in a certain way, the husband provides and protects, the wife partners with the husband. And as they go through that process, then natural love comes between the two. Now, it's not that intrinsically the man did not love the woman or the woman did not love the man. It did not manifest. It required to go through that stage of marriage, and then it manifests later on. So similarly, when the devotees are starting the devotional life, then that love is there, but it requires the framework of the rules and regulation to mature and blossom there. And we use the word dormant, but even for devotees, it is not fully dormant, because there has to be traces of that love. And that's why Rupa Goswami says purvaras. There has to be some prior taste that is there, but it is not sufficient. There are so many people who will say that I love Krishna, but I don't want to go through chanting, I don't want to go through this and that. So they may have some love for Krishna, but their conviction hasn't built to the point where they want to submit to the rules and regulations.
Got it, Prabhuji. Thank you so much. Another question is related to Purvaras, Prabhu. So whoever the devotees who is becoming devotee definitely has previously part of devotional service, Prabhu. Otherwise, it's not possible.
It is possible because the nature of bhakti is that it can manifest in the Chaturshloki of the Bhagavatam. This point is made that because bhakti is for the ultimate benefit of the jiva, by its very definition, it cannot exclude anybody, because then it would indicate partiality, right? So it's the so to speak the birthright of every jiva to execute bhakti. So even if there is no purvaras, which means that the person has not performed bhakti in previous lifetimes, still that jiva at some point was in the spiritual world, living with Krishna in pure devotional service there, right? So that purvaras is there. It's just that it's more dormant. So Prabhupada gives the example of dry wood and wet wood. That there are some devotees who, because of purvaras, because of it's like when you go out preaching, right? One person you give Bhagavad Gita and the person's eyes light up and they say, tell me more, tell me more. You ask another person and the person just brushes you off. So there are some people who require a lot more mercy before they take to bhakti. But everybody, bhakti is the right of every jiva.
Thank you, Prabhuji. That's all I have. Thanks so much. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. So we'll take one last question. We're a little over time. Rajiv Shyam Prabhu, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Prabhu. Thank you for the class. So my question was more related to like how, if I understood it right, sadhana bhakti leads to bhava and bhava leads to prema. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah.
So if we were to like, a lot of times our intention is to go back to Godhead. That's why we are in this path. So do we have to come to that prema stage only then we are eligible to go back to Godhead, or can you go back to Godhead even at a sadhana stage, sadhana bhakti stage, or some other stage?
We'll talk a little bit more about it when we go to the later chapter. It's a good question, Prabhu. So one can actually practice sadhana bhakti and go back to Godhead. So you can be at the stage of bhava and prema practicing sadhana bhakti. It's a little confusing, so that's why I want you to hold that question. But the short answer is yes. Sadhakas can also go. It's just that their mellow will be different. When the sadhakas go back to Godhead, they're mostly in Shantaras or Dasaras. So they have a different mellow in terms of the relationship to Krishna. But yes, the answer is yes.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to Ajit Krishna, maybe next time. I just don't want to hold up everyone there. So we'll end over here. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya eva cha patitanam pavanebhyo
Vaishnavibhyo namo namaha.
Anant Koti Vaishnavinda ki
Jai.
Shila Prabhupada ki